going to look back at the past. In fact, I'm going to condense 66 million years of evolution into 15 minutes. So, hold on, we're going to go really quick. So, in order to kind of talk about what's happened in the past and what has climate change meant in the history of the Earth, we have to kind of start here. This is the geologic, back to 454 million years ago. These are all the different geologic epochs. We're going to look at the most recent ones going back about 66 million years ago, and you can see those called out on the left. Now, one thing to look at in this colorful chart, on the left-hand column, it says mass extinctions. And you can see the numbers for the percentage of the species that died during those extinctions. So again, it's not uncommon on the Earth to have had a lot of change. Okay, so let's start with the late Cretaceous. This is the end of the dinosaurs, okay? The 66 million marker is when the asteroid hit and the dinosaurs all pretty much went extinct. It was tropical. There was no ice at either pole, much higher sea level than today. There was tropical forest in North America, including redwoods, which I'll show you in a minute. And California was mostly under the ocean. And the continents were drifting apart, changing. Then we get to the Paleocene, warm, humid, but cooler than the Cretaceous. And then there was a very large, what's called thermal maximum between Paleocene and Eocene. Again, much higher sea level, tropical forest growing almost everywhere. California is partly under the ocean, but has very high rainfall on those areas that are outside of the ocean. And the Pacific Plate starts to subduct the North American plate. That's what gives us the San Andreas Fault and dramatically changes the topography of California. Then we come to the Eocene. Temperature is similar to what our equators have today, but then it changes to semi-arid, then it warms, then it becomes dry and cool again. And you'll see this, a lot of this back and forth of different warmer versus cooler temperatures. Global lowering of sea level, so a big change there. All major mammalian groups are present, and California has tropical rainforest and semi-arid tropical forest, if you can kind of imagine that. And the Rockies have now uplifted due to that subduction. So let's see some pictures. Okay, here you can see the Rocky Mountains. This is mountains, that dark color. But you look to the west of it and you barely see any land. That's because, again, most of California is under the water. Sequoia species and laurel species were common in California and many parts of North America during the Eocene and are considered relics of this time period. So they've existed on the Earth a very long time. However, sequoia is limited to just a very narrow band along the California coast at this point, from having been distributed all in pretty much around the world, while the laurel, bay laurel, has adapted to live in numerous different types of areas. So the dots show you all the places there have been fossils found of sequoia species. So you can see how broadly distributed it was. And then in the red, little red area there, right here, that's California. That's all that's left of them now. Sequoia itself. There are another species that's up in the Sierras. This is a couple of pre-whale species. I'm not going to try to pronounce their names because it's just too hard. But they lived in the ocean in the early Eocene epoch, and they were both ancestors of modern whales. And then we have this guy. I couldn't resist. Okay, this is a hell pig. All right, so if you look here, this is a modern day boar. Okay, you know how scary and big boars are? Okay, imagine this guy, this hell pig. He's like 6 feet tall. So they went extinct. We're not concerned with that. In fact, we're probably pretty happy they're not around anymore. All right, the next 3 epochs. The Oligocene. This is a cooling and drying epoch with one period of warming, again, that up and down, continued lowering of sea level, and most important, we start to find glaciers in Antarctica, so ice is forming. The grasslands begin to spread around the globe, replacing forests in a lot of locations. In California, we have closed cone pine forest, woodland, chaparral, and sage vegetation, all beginning to invade from those Rocky Mountains and the deserts. The San Andreas Fault system is formed, and we have a lot more volcanic activity. Then we get to the Miocene. Again, this is cooling and drying. Generally, if you think of the Cretaceous as being the hottest period where we started, the trend is getting cooler, cooler, cooler. But there is a warm period in here of 2 million years. We see glaciation continuing and a consequent lowering of sea level, continued expansion of grasslands, and chaparral becomes prominent in California. So to go from tropical forest to chaparral, it had to dry out quite a bit and get a lot warmer. The rise of the Sierras and the formation of the Cascades is occurring. In the Pliocene, so we're up to 2.5 million years ago, warmer conditions, warmer ocean. Temperatures cooler every 40,000 years or so. So you see these cycles of warm, cooler, warm, cooler. Sea level is higher. Conifer forest is now covering a lot of places. And oak woodlands begin to expand into California. California, at this point, begins to develop its Mediterranean climate, which is quite rare in the world. And perhaps most importantly, we find the first fossils of our species, Homo sapiens. So what did California look like? So this is the mid-Miocene and the late Miocene, and I put an outline of the state. You can see how much more land was uplifted out of the ocean and the mountains that were built between early and late Miocene. But we still aren't completely formed in the way that California is today. Okay, so chaparral comes to California. This is a vegetation type that is adapted to very dry conditions in the summer, that Mediterranean climate. It is also adapted to fire. And you can see how broadly distributed it is in the state today. We also have Miocene mammals, and everybody's probably seen a picture or something of some of these. They're hilarious. So I couldn't, again, resist, but this is a terror bird, okay, and it's hunting a full-grown elk. This is its skull compared to our size skull, and this is an eagle. So it's another one of these, aren't we happy we don't have these anymore, kind of creatures, and it went extinct. There was a number of different kinds of them. Horses evolved in North America, but they later went extinct, and they didn't come back to North America until the Europeans brought them. The elephant here, this is one of the extinct species of elephants, is called a Gomphothere, or something like that. And you can see how it has kind of a totally different trunk system. So a lot of these animals had really, they just looked a lot different. It's kind of like everything speciated, and there was a lot of versions of different groups of animals. But most of them didn't work out, and when the climate changed, they went extinct. Okay, oak woodlands came to California in the Pliocene, and of course are another very common type of vegetation. You can see how many different areas are covered by this, and we have a very large number of different oaks, some of which only occur in California. And another great one. Okay, so here's a modern day rhino. They're pretty big, but this is its extinct cousin called a Paraceratherium, I think that's how you say it. Okay, we're down to our last two epochs. The Pleistocene. Most people have heard of the Pleistocene. This is the Ice Ages. 2.5 million years ago to 11,700 years ago. Okay, this is the period where human beings spread across the globe. So a lot of our genetics and our history comes from this period. So we have a big cooling, large increase in glaciers over large areas of the Earth, with warmer periods in between what are called glacial maximums. Sea level is about 300 feet lower than today. Ice covers areas that used to be conifer forest, And there's large lakes that occur in the western US. The Sierra Nevada has glaciers, but coastal California, like where we are, is serving as a refuge for many animals because it's warm. North and South America are connected. The Bering Land Bridge is exposed, and humans are migrating all over. Then we come to the Holocene, which is the period we're in now, although some people call it a different thing. So 11,700 years ago to present, the glaciers melted. It gets drier and warmer. Sea level rises to the current level. Grasslands expand into large areas, and 75% of those large mammals die. They go extinct because of the change in the climate. Now in California, we have long periods of drought. Pines move to higher elevations in the Sierras and the White Mountains because it's now too dry at the lower elevations. And of course, there's a huge expansion of human influence around the globe. So here we are with the great North American ice sheets. And if you look right here, these are the glaciers that covered the mountains in Washington, Oregon, and the Sierras. This is sort of a funny picture because it's done on a modern day aerial, but basically the ocean was right here past the Farallon Islands, and San Francisco Bay was not filled with water, it was a valley. These are the closed cone pines that covered a lot of California. They call them closed cone because you can see that the pine cones are not naturally open. But when there's a fire, they open up, the adult tree dies, but all of these, seedling trees come up. So one of the species of closed cone pine is Monterey pine, which we have planted everywhere, but it actually didn't originally grow there. Here are the fossil locations for this species. You can see that it's in a lot of locations, and this is where it is today. So its range has completely shrunk down to just a few locations on the coast. So again, another big change in the range of these plants as we see a change in the climate. Now, these are those big lakes that occurred during the Pleistocene. This is the San Joaquin Valley, and this is Lake Bonneville, and what's left of it, the Great Salt Lake. This is Lake Lahontan, and what's left of it, Pyramid Lake. And then down over here, some of these lakes fill Death Valley. So they had these great murals. I just had to put these pictures in. So these lakes were filled with life. And okay, we think of where they are now. Okay, this is one of the dried up versions of these lakes is where they do the Burning Man Festival. Okay, so this is Nevada. It used to be really flooded with water, filled with all these different animals, including, mastodons, woolly mammoths. You see a horse there, different kinds of fish life. Oh, I just have to show you some of these. They're so funny. Okay, so this is a three-toed sloth, and you see a little camel back there. And this is buffalo. All these things occurred. And then this is what's called a short-faced bear. The reason that American grizzlies have such a nasty disposition is because they grew up with these guys. And so they are very, very aggressive because they had to deal with short-faced bears. And we had American lions. Okay, none of these species are around any longer. Now this is all about the camels. Camels originated in North America, and they migrated over the Bering Land Bridge into where we think of them coming from now, which is Africa and the Middle East. They also went down into South America and became llamas and a lot of those different species. So we don't have camels anymore because when all those lakes dried up, a lot of their habitat went away, but a lot of other places do. Now, this is a picture of the lakes that are down in the Mojave region. So this is Death Valley, Lake Manly. And this is an important little thing to understand. These lakes did not dry up because the amount of water going into them was reduced. They dried up because the higher temperatures caused such an increase in evaporation that it evaporated the lakes. This kind of change could occur in our future because we're going to see higher temperatures. Now, what happened to the fish in those lakes, at least in Lake Manly, is many of them died, but there are a number of little tiny springs like this and this. Each one of these little white dots is a spring where these pupfish live. And because they have been isolated from each other for so long, they are individual species or subspecies. So these are all endangered fish that just live in, little tiny bits of water that are permanent out there in the desert. So it kind of shows you, again, this is a relic animal species that is only there by luck, really, that they found a place to live. Okay, now to some future changes that are predicted for Sonoma County. So the upper picture here shows the range of blue oak expected in the year 2050. And here it is in 2100. Blue oak is extremely drought tolerant. It's the driest area oak. And it's going to expand its range to the west while retaining its range in the east. And you can see this because it stays where it's light orange, it gains where it's green, and it loses where it's dark orange. And you can see how much more of it there is over in the west. Now, if you would like your own personal blue oak, we're giving them away at the CLSI table with planting instructions. We have like 20 of them, I think, so at the break, go get your own personal blue oak and plant it. Okay, this is oak. So live oak is not nearly as drought tolerant as blue oak. And you can see on the top how much of its range currently is going to be lost by 2050 and also 2100, and how it is also going to be moving to the west. And I just had to put a little funny in here. This is thanks to Brett Parkman. Okay, everybody had a good laugh, all right? All right, now I'm going to talk very quickly about a research study done on the ancient farmers of the America Southwest who dealt with very long droughts. So this is the floodplain of the Mimbres River. This is the river back here. This is in New Mexico. And this is the Mimbres River itself and the flow in October. So we don't have very many streams with that much water in October. So these drain some pretty high mountains that have snow and have pretty good flow. This is an illustration of floodplain farming by Southwest Indians. They grew corn and squash and different things, but corn was their staple food. And here are some old irrigation canals that you can now find on the Mimbres floodplain. So it's kind of interesting to go and see these things. This is a picture or a little model of a settlement of the Mogollon people. I probably said that wrong, but on the Mimbres floodplain. And then this is an example of an abandoned settlement, and there's tons of these all over the Southwest. So my first graph here, this is the rainfall flow and drought record of the Colorado River Basin, which was created from tree ring data. And thank you to all the researchers that did all this work. The blue lines are the rainfall. The red line is the flow in the river. And the yellow there are these very long droughts that this group of farmers had to make it through. The bottom graph is more specific to central Arizona between 1200 and 1450 AD. And it shows the rainfall in the black jagged line and then the periods of drought. And you can see some of these are well over 50 years. In fact, the medieval drought is is over 100 years. So these are very long periods of little to no rainfall. So this is the study that was done by Ingram and Schulmeyer. They looked at areas that were farmed and settled in this area of central Arizona, and then they looked at the east Membris area and the main Membris area. And this is what they found. In the central Arizona area, the archaeologists reviewed the settlements in farming areas with high average annual precipitation and those with low average annual precipitation. And they compared the level and timing of abandonment of these settlements for these two areas between 1200 and 1450 AD. In Arizona, the research found that the farmers in areas with high average annual rainfall all abandoned their settlements and migrated, whereas the farmers in areas with lower average annual rainfall did not abandon their settlements. They found this same pattern when comparing the wetter main Membris River floodplain with the drier eastern Membris area during the 1100 AD period. So what this indicates is that the farmers in the low rainfall areas had adapted to drier conditions and used farming methods that allowed them to grow adequate amounts of food with low amounts of water. Everybody get that? Okay, so the summary. The fossil record shows how climate change has resulted in enormous changes in the species that live on the Earth. There have been many thousands of species that have gone extinct and many species that have evolved and adapted to the new climatic or geologic conditions. The range of individual plant and animal species have also changed significantly. The current pace of climate change is faster than prior periods, and we should all expect all of these changes to occur around us. We will all need to accept change, particularly extinction and range changes. Ancient farmers migrated to new areas when droughts became lengthy, but some adapted to the new conditions and stayed in place. Farmers here will also need to adapt to a drier, hotter environment. And we all need to work together as we face these challenges.